All right, theoretically, we should be live. I'm going to give just a minute or two for people to hop on and verify on my end that we're up. But if you are out there, thanks for joining us. Yep, we are up. So we are here with Master Scott Merrill. Master Merrill is former regional director of Region 22 and the current chief of security of the entire World Thompson Association. Glad to have you here, sir. He's also a good personal friend. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure. I appreciate you having me.
Anything you want to say before we officially get started, sir?
No, just to load everybody that's out there watching this, and hopefully you learn something.
All right, sounds good. So I have some pre-prepared questions for Master Merrill. If you guys have anything you want to add or pop in the comments, I will be monitoring that as we go, and I'll let Master Merrill know. We already have about 6-7 people hopping on, so it'll be coming. So we'll start the same way I kind of start all of these, and everybody has. If you could just kind of tell us your background story as far as how and why you got involved in the martial arts and in the World Tung Soo Association specifically.
Well, I guess the easiest way to say it was all by accident. Sometime in around 1982 or 1983, for those that don't know me, I'm retired law enforcement. During that time of my life, I was a patrol officer with a local police department here outside of State College. And one night, myself and a couple other officers had done a traffic stop on the main highway, Atherton Street, going through town, and pretty much ended up into a Wild West fist fight, a brawl in the middle of the highway. There were 2 of us and 4 or 5 of these guys. By the time it was all said and done, we won the fight. We ended up getting to go home after breakfast that morning, and they all ended up getting to spend the next couple months in jail. And we were all sitting around breakfast. A bunch of us were talking of the local guys that would all get together, police officers. And one of the guys that was involved in the fight with me, he made a comment. He says, he said, we won that one. But he said, we were really lucky. And we kind of chuckled about it and didn't really think much of it. And I don't know, about 2 or 3 months later, he come back and he says, hey, I think I've got the answer to us not maybe losing or not having to worry about losing so many fights. And I said, what's that? And he said, I met this guy at the athletic club. He's a karate instructor. And I talked to him, and he'd be interested in doing some self-defense classes for the police departments. And from there, it kind of morphed a long ways from there. But the short version of that story is that would have been around middle of either the end of 82 or beginning of 83. We started doing a police officer self-defense class with Master White. He was mainly in charge of it. We went through a lot of his GUP students over the course of the next 2 years, 3 years, and some of his black belts that weren't quite used to dealing with us. We didn't do any formal training. We didn't even know he had what type of karate he was involved in. Most of the time we train in just sweatpants or gym clothes or jeans. And a lot of times if the patrol shifts were manned such, we just show up in our police uniforms, park our police cars outside the middle school where the training classes were at, and we train for an hour or 2 hours sometimes. From there, we kind of became very close friends with Master White. And originally the class started out 25 or 30 of us police officers would go together, and we train together 2 or 3 times a week. And usually it was either in the school gymnasium, the wrestling room at the Park Forest Middle School, or if it was closed, we'd just train outside in either the parking lot or in the football practice field that was beside the school. And over the course of the next couple of years, it kind of dwindled down like most classes do. We started out with 20, 30 people, and then it was down to 10 or 15. And after a period of time, it ended up with being about 4 or 5 of us that attended it fairly regularly. And we had people like Master Michael K would show up. As a matter of fact, kind of a funny story I probably should tell later, but one of the stories was Master K showed up to one of the classes and was filling in for Master White. And I remember Master White coming back at the next class, and he said, how was class? And everybody said, hey, it went fine, no problems. And he said, well, that seems odd. And we said, why is that? And he said, well, Master K just shook his head and said, those guys are nuts. And he said, if you need me again, I'll have to think about it. So from there, probably the only one that we had was a big enough glutton for punishment that stayed with us, and regardless of how much we pushed him, was Bill Boswell. And a lot of people will remember Bill Boswell. He was one of the old timers. He's a young guy, but old timers. It was back in the early days with Master White in Appalachia. So that's kind of how the training started. My formal training in Tung Sado really didn't come along until 1984. 1985, Master White had asked us to come and watch a GUP test. We didn't know what a GUP test was at that point, up at the White Building on Penn State campus. And he wanted to introduce us to his instructor, Grandmaster Shin. And so we did. There was 3 of us at that point that were still kind of going out and training with him regularly. And once we got there, we were introduced to Grandmaster Shin. And then also this, at that time, was probably one of the most intimidating people I'd ever met in my life, and that was Master Beam. And Master Beam never said a word. We probably were with him for 2 or 3 hours. He never said a word, stood behind Grandmaster Shin and just watched everything that was going on. There were probably 40 or 50 people testing at that test at the time. And at one point when the adults started to get up and test, Master White come up to the 3 of us and he said, "Hey guys, I wonder if you'd do me a favor." And we're like, "Well, sure. What is it, Mike?" I mean, at that time we didn't call him Master, or not even Mister. He was a 3rd degree black belt at the time. And so, "Sure, what do you need?" And he said, "Well, my instructor would kind of like to see what I've been teaching you guys. Would you mind, stepping out on the floor and just showing them what you know?" And we're like, "Well, yeah, sure. We haven't been doing any of this kind of stuff you're doing here. At least we didn't think we had been." And he said, "Well, just do the best you can and just kind of follow along and see how you do." And little did we know until, several weeks later that was our orange belt test. So it kind of started by happenstance and kind of got tricked, and the rest has been kind of history. I've been doing it pretty much ever since.
Yes, sir. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate that. You had mentioned Master White. Obviously, you're one of many masters that can share that lineage back through Master White and Appalachia. Are there any other stories or memories you have of either Master White or just Appalachia Tung Sado as a studio?
Well, yeah, probably a bunch of them aren't appropriate in this environment, but it was a lot different back then. I mean, Master White, has a long list of people that have become masters that have trained or at least started under him, and at some degree either started under him or sometime through the course of their career, such as yourself, trained under him or alongside of him. And a lot of them have come and gone. A lot of them are still around and still teaching and running, very successful studios. Unfortunately, with the recent passing of Master K, I probably spent most of my time training under either Master White or Master K, or a combination of both of them, which was always a fun challenge in and of itself. And you can probably attest to this too, Master Jorgensen, that, it was always easy to take a class from one of them, but when both of them were there, you never knew what was going to happen. And you learned to adapt pretty quickly. But, Master Vaughn, back in the early days, he was there quite a bit and did a lot of training with us, both up at the old YMCA, and he would come back and visit at the new YMCA on several occasions. A lot of our GUP tests were held over at the YMCA in State College, where I believe it was his studio at that time. So, yeah, there's, a lot of people were involved in it over those years.
Sure. You had mentioned, obviously we had recently heard of the tragic passing of Master K. I actually heard about it literally right after the interview that I had with Master Holmcheck. We had just been starting the whole idea of interviewing Master K. Sadly, since we can't do that, I wondered if you could maybe share either maybe the first time you met Master K or some memorable experience with him.
Well, kind of like I said, the first time I met him, I really didn't know who he was. I want to say he was maybe a 1st degree black belt at that time. Again, it was when we had probably about 10 or 15 of us at the police self-defense class, and Master White had to go somewhere or do something for work. For whatever reason, he had Master White or Master K cover that class. And like I said, half the time, most of us were in police uniforms with our full police gear and stuff like that. And, it was very obvious that Master K was used to running kind of the traditional Tung Sado class. And, of course, we didn't bow in at that time. There were no flags. And, very little yes sir, no sir at that point, and pretty much we said what was on our mind. And one of the big things that I remember both Master K and Bill Boswell mentioning was, cops are kind of, I don't know what the political correct word is. We're kind of, know-it-all sometimes, and we're show me people. And I remember we were doing some, well, later to find out they were kind of the Holston Sewell one steps and doing like numbers 1 through 5. And I remember saying to Master, well, Bill Boswell, I did this too, and he ended up thumping me and throwing me on the ground. But I remember at this particular class, Master K was basically showing how to get out of an escape from a grab from the rear. And I was in full police uniform at the time. And Master K said, okay, come on up and give me a bear hug. Well, Master K was a lot smaller then than he, was in the later years too. And I went up and I wrapped my arms around him, and and I squeezed him so hard you could just hear the life come out of him, the air come out of him, picked him up off the ground. His feet were kind of dangling. And I remember him saying the last breath of air he said was, "Are you ready?" And that was pretty much the last thing I remember till I was picking myself up off the ground. And so it was, back in those days, it was the instructors that come into class kind of had to prove themselves to a bunch of, I guess, arrogant cops who thought they knew everything. And that was my first dealing with Master K. It wasn't until after we did our test for Orange Belt that we became more familiar with him. And then at one point, the police class stopped because there was only 3 of us. And we actually started training at the racket clubs over on the athletic club north. And then for a period of about a year and a half, 2 years, Master K was actually teaching that while Master White was doing a career change at that time.
Thank you, sir. Continuing kind of talking about Master K a little bit, can you maybe share a little bit less from maybe the martial arts side, but kind of your impressions, just so we have this for posterity, kind of who Master K was as a person and kind of what his legacy is. I know that's not an easy thing to sum up in a minute or two, but
yeah, and I'm not the best speaker in the world, but and I've since I've been asked to and have accepted the position of just kind of overseeing Penn State Martial Arts Group in this transition time till we see what the future of it's going to be. And he's got some great students, and a lot of his students of recent years. I mean, his lineage goes back, and better than I, for a long, long ways. And Master K, and talking to Master K's wife, Joyce Ilfelder K, we talked about how Mike was way more than a martial artist, way more than a karate teacher to these people. He was just so much more. And I'm trying to, keep it somewhat together as I'm saying this, but he was there for everybody and anybody that needed him. There's many people in the world that'll say, if you ever need anything, I'm just a phone call away. And, my wife and I went through some traumatic turmoil over 20 years ago in our life. And, between Master White and Master K, they were 2 of the people that said, we're there no matter what you need. And they were. It didn't matter what time, day or night. And, Master K was, Master White, Master K, and I'll put myself in that same category. I'm probably even worse. I remember talking about Master White, and I don't want to get off track here too bad, but Master White not only would teach me karate classes and we would train in karate classes, but he came down. I introduced him to our SWAT team for the state, and Master White would come down on many occasions and help me train our SWAT team in some defensive tactics stuff. And I remember the first time he showed up there, one of the guys was a Golden Glove champion boxer. And, our SWAT team leader was kind of crazy at the time. So he would tell somebody, well, if you don't think he can defend himself, go ahead and attack him. And, the first guy would go out and throw a punch at him, and Master White would put him on the ground. And second guy would come out and throw a punch at him, and somebody put him on the ground. And, it was kind of like traditional sparring, one-step sparring. These guys apparently had, some martial arts experience. Well, this Golden Glove boxer said, yeah, that's all well and good if you're fighting somebody that's not trained. But he said, what would you do against somebody who maybe was a professional boxer? And Master White said, well, why don't you come on up here and show me? And this gentleman, John, he gets up, tall guy about my height, really, really athletic. And he kind of goes jab, jab. And the next thing you know, Master White disappeared from him. and you see John kind of looking around like, where'd Master White go? And then all of a sudden he's flying through the air. Master White dropped to the ground and done a sweep. Well, you'd asked me about Master K, and I'll put that together with what I wanted to say about Master K. Many years later, we were doing a SWAT training up here at State College, and I talked our SWAT team leader into having Master K come over and do some demonstrations with the knife work that he had done. And of course, you know, when you look at Master White, Master K, and me, you know, we often get that, you know, the belts, you know, the belly over the belt club. And it's like, okay, you know, I understand that. But you look at them, and if you were to walk into a bar to pick a fight, these guys you wouldn't even think twice about. But anyways, Master K came to the group on this knife class, and one of the guys in the class thought he'd challenge Master K and say, well, yeah, okay, this is great if you know I'm coming at you with a knife, but what if I get up in your face? And Master K just stood there for a second, and the guy says, what are you going to do now? He says, more importantly, what are you going to do? And about that time, Master K had like one of his Bowie trainers stuck up underneath the guy's lower abdomen. And the second one was a knife stuck right here to the side of his ear. And the guy didn't even, he said, what do you mean? What am I going to do? And then all of a sudden he's like, oh, wow, where'd they come from? So, you know, Master K, you know, he was known for his knife work. He was known for his swords. If you ever got a knife or a sword from him and you didn't cut yourself with it by accident, then you never took it out of the sheath, or you never took it out, you never opened the case. But the side that a lot of people don't know about Master K was the warm, touching personality that he had, that he honestly, truly cared for everybody and would go out of his way to do anything that he could do to help anybody out, no matter what the problem was. And, you know, I guess maybe his psychology background led to a lot of that. But, you know, he was a very honorable man. And, you know, in central Pennsylvania, for those of us that are here that acknowledge it, you know, Master White, Master K were kind of our founders and our fathers. And now there's, you know, so big of shoes to fill that, you know, I don't know that they'll ever be able to be filled. And it's going to be tough to continue on without both of them around, because Master White continued to carry on Master K continued to carry on Master White's legacy and did it with passion and did a great job of it.
Yes, sir. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. I know it's hard sometimes to get that out, but it's appreciated. And we did want to kind of do a little bit of a tribute to Master K. So I appreciate that time. We'll move a little bit more towards things you have done personally again. So can you tell us a little bit about the formation of your first studio with A Mountain Wind and how that came about?
Yeah, I had taken over training what later become Penn State Martial Arts Group 2 in 1998, February or March 1998. Again, after the traumatic loss of a family member, Master White and Master K kind of conspired against me and decided that I needed something to help do my energy in. And they asked me if I would come over and if I was interested in training and helping train over at the athletic club, which was the second location for Penn State Martial Arts Group. And I agreed to do that. And after a period of time, through nobody's fault, I was offered the head instructor's position there. And right after testing for, I guess it would have been second degree at that time, maybe it was third degree, I don't remember. I ended up being the head instructor of Penn State Martial Arts Group 2. And I did that under Master K, ran that studio, and I, against a lot of people's words that thought that I would never be able to do it, because my personality and Master K's personality, we were kind of and yang on a lot of ways. So a lot of people thought I was crazy and thought it would never work. But I think we really did a good job together. And as time progressed on, I started to feel the need to be more than just the head instructor. I needed to, you know, I felt like I needed to be the answer to the questions, not just the go-between. And so for about 3 or 4 months, I struggled with what I wanted to do. And I talked to Master White about it. And I talked to Grandmaster Shin about it. And, you know, struggled with, you know, the fact that I didn't want to leave Penn State Martial Arts Group 2 or the athletic club class, but I felt I really needed to do something. And at that time, I was either going to go back to Appalachia and take over being the head instructor up there under Master White, which really wouldn't have been a whole lot different, or I was going to approach Master K about whether he would turn the studio over to me. And the funny part about this is I practiced the speech. I had this down. I had crib notes, and I mean, I was more organized than I'd been organized for anything in my life, I think, probably. And finally, through Master White, I talked him into, okay, this Saturday's the day. Can you get Master K here and make it so we can talk? And so we get up to Phillipsburg and we're getting ready to train. And Master White says, Master K, Scott needs to talk to you. Go to my office. So we go over in the office and Master K goes in and I bow to him and I stand up and kind of real formally, I start reading my spiel out of memory. I mean, I had practiced the speech and I went on for probably 5 to 10 minutes and Master K said, Scott, time out. Hold on. He says, what are you asking me? And I'm like, man, I'm only a third of the way through my spiel. So I just picked up where I left off. You know, it was kind of like the Gettysburg Address being interrupted. And I started going on for another 5 minutes. And now Master K, who had been sitting on a couch, he stands up and he's like, he puts his hands up. And he says, Scott, what are you trying to ask me? And I'm like, well, give me a minute, sir. I'm getting to it. Finally, he looks at me and he basically says, either ask me what you want to ask me or I'm out of here. I'm going to train. I said, I took a deep breath and I remember just as vivid as it is today, I looked at him and I said, Master K, will you turn the studio over to me? He says, really? That's all you wanted? Yeah, let's go train. And I was actually crushed with his answer, yes, because I still had probably another 20 minutes of my speech to talk him into letting me have this studio. And then the dilemma was, what were we going to call it? And a lot of people don't know that Master White, for his fourth master, did a bong form, and it was called A Mountain Wind Bong Form. And I struggled with what I was going to name the studio, and Master Thompson, which was one of Master Shin's original black belts I had become friends with. He had lived out in Ohio. He had been in at a Region 8 championship. We had talked and he had given me some ideas about if I ever had a studio, and I thought I had a logo picked out. It was going to be YMT Karate. That was what I was going to name my karate class. And everybody I talked to said, YMT. And the first question was, why? And I said, well, it meant, you know, Grandmaster's first English words were, you must try, according to the old timers in Korea. So anyhow, we were finally ready to the point where I was supposed to make this announcement to Grandmaster Shin that we had talked and everything, but I had to come up with the studio name. And as I was driving to a Region 8 black belt camp, I'd just gone through the Narrows on the other side of Lewistown. And for those that have never been there, it goes from a 4-lane highway down to a 2-lane highway at the base of a mountain by a river. And I come around a curve and this wind just blows my truck halfway across the road. And I said to myself, wow, that was a heck of a mountain wind. And it was like, bam, I pulled off the side of the road, started scribbling stuff down on paper. And that was how a mountain wind martial arts became. And then with a lot of help of Master White, Master K, Maggie Gonski, who helped me get the design for the logo and stuff. That's kind of how a mountain wind grew out of it.
Sure. Thank you. That's a great story. I appreciate it. So we go along with that a little bit later on, maybe a lot later on for some. You had turned that school over to Master Susan Strong. And unfortunately, Master White passed away. You took over as chief instructor of Appalachia Tongsudo at the time. So can you talk a little bit about what it was like to become, you know, the master, the instructor at Appalachia?
Well, it was kind of dual fold. As I started in '98, I took over teaching at Penn State Martial Arts Group due till 2005. 2005 to 2014 is when I turned the studio over to Susan, or Master Strom. Master White passed away in 2013, and I inherited Appalachia. For almost a year there, I was trying to run both schools at the same time, and you know, kind of it kind of all happened together in a good way at the same time. It really became too much for me to try to manage both schools, because at that time, although Susan was teaching pretty much full time for me, or Master Strom was teaching for me full time at the Mountain Wind School, I still felt that I needed to spread the information out. And, you know, kind of following in the footsteps of what Master White did and what he talked about and what Master K talked about, was preaching about making it available for your students to move up. At that time, there was no way to make master without owning a studio. And Master Strom Susan had put in so much work with the Mountain Wind that it kind of fit two folds. It was me finding a way to not have to run two studios at the same time, plus it was a way for me to honor the transitions from Master White and Master K, to provide an opportunity for Susan to be able to move ahead into Master. So at that time, after much discussion, we decided that we would turn the studio over and she would accept the studio and continue with the same A Mountain Wind Martial Arts, which she's done a great job since then. And at that time, then I was able to pretty much dedicate full time to teaching and trying to get Appalachia, which had kind of faltered at this point due to Master White's illnesses. We had been training. I know you were there, and a lot of people would come in when Master White was to the point where he couldn't travel. We would actually go back in our roots to his house out in Glass City and train in his yard. And he would come out on the porch most days and sit on the porch while we would train. So moved up there and started building that up. And at that time, Master Roy Donaldson had been working for Master White. And so I kind of put him in the head instructor's position there. And up until about 2 years ago, I maintained the studio ownership of Appalachia. And it was tough. I mean, to walk into that studio, and I mean, anybody that's trained there and their roots come through or have started there or passed through there, there's a connection that is just, I don't know, there's a key connection there that just is kind of unexplainable. And, the first couple times that we walked into that studio and I had everybody bowing to me as Sabanim, it just, it just wasn't right. It just, it was hard to imagine that I had stepped in there. And Master Strome kind of hit me below the belt one day when we were having a discussion about trying to, she's the technical lady. She knows every quote and chapter and verse in the book. And I'm kind of a fly by the seat of my pants guy. And we were having a debate about why we do a certain thing in a certain form or something along those lines. And afterwards, I remembered her. She made a statement to me. She says, you're now Master White. And that hit me so hard, I almost didn't come back. And, and no way in a million years am I ever going to fill his shoes. And nor am I, as I told the Penn State Martial Arts Group students the other day, nor am I ever in a million years going to fill the shoes of Master K and trying to help Penn State Martial Arts Group come out.
Thank you, sir. It's kind of segues in a little bit. You've actually spent most of your life in some form of service, whether that's military service or law enforcement or education of others in and out of the martial arts. Can you talk a little bit about how maybe that's affected you as a martial artist or your personal philosophy or anything just about the history of?
Well, yeah, I think that what I bring to the martial arts and what I glean from the martial arts is a little different perspective than most people that trained. And because I can sit here and honestly say with no problems that on at least 3 occasions that I can put physical skills that I learned in the martial arts to use, I'm alive here today because of the martial arts. I tend to look at everything we do from the martial arts in more of a, I'll use air quotes, real world training. And you and I've sparred a million times, and you're probably one of the best sparrers, especially going back a few years that, I'd stand next to. And, we often talk about, in law enforcement, which I did over 40 years, I'm still a law enforcement trainer, both firearms and defensive tactics. In law enforcement, you've got to learn to start to relying on your instinct and, the etheric experience, that second nature, the hair on the back of your neck stands up, whatever you want to call it. And that's a side of the martial arts that I try to bring out in people, is to try to make them trust their training and trust their instincts. We've often, we've all heard the saying that action beats reaction 100% of the time, which is absolutely correct. But if your reaction starts, and Susan will get mad at me because this is one of my riddles, if your reaction starts before the action, then action doesn't beat it. And, that's one of those things that you'll see some people start to take notes and they'll draw a little map and they're like, that doesn't make any sense. And somebody here probably may say the same thing, I'm nuts. But, I trained SWAT teams. I was on SWAT teams since 1976 in one form or another. I was involved in training of SWAT teams, both firearms, entry. defensive tactics. Master White would come down. As I said, he would come down and help train with our SWAT teams. And I know up until the day he died, probably one of his proudest moments was we were training at Fort Indian Town Gap. And I probably should be careful how I say this, but we got activated to do a SWAT job in Center City, Philadelphia, and they loaded us up on helicopters. And Mike said to the team, Master White said to the team leader, "What am I going to do while you guys are gone?" He says, "What do you mean gone?" He says, "You're going with us." And they gave him a whole set of gear, and we got on the choppers and we flew down to Center City, and we got out of the aircraft, started to get out of the van, and Master White was with the assistant team leader. And he said to him, "So, well, what should I do?" He said, "Well, come with me." He said, "Well, I don't have a gun." And the assistant team leader turned around and handed him his MP5, and he says, "Now you've got one." And, Mike, Master White, that was kind of his being accepted as a team member. And that's anybody that's in law enforcement that's hearing this, you know what I'm talking about. That's a tough bridge to gap, and tough area to break into, to befriend and become part of. But yeah, the training, I do a lot of training with kinesiology. I've written some articles in law enforcement about kinesiology, the study of body language. I spent many years studying under the National Law Enforcement Training Council of the pre-attack kinesiological cues. We kind of identified, I don't take credit for it, but I've studied it a long time, about 12 to 14 things that people will almost always do before they engage in a physical confrontation. And I try to pass that on through my training and stuff. But I think my early days of martial arts, being the police self-defense class, if we'd have walked into Master White in 1982 and he'd have said, "Okay, you guys line up over here and bow to the flags and bow to this Korean Grandmaster," and yes or no, sir, we'd have walked out the door and we'd have never taken a lesson from him. So, for those 2 or 3 years of just being kind of laid back and learning the actual defensive tactics part of it, led into my passion for, and the passion that I still have with the martial arts, of trying to be able to pass that on to people and for them to hopefully never have to use it. But in the real world, it's one thing to know how to do something. It's another thing to be able to actually do it. And I think that's what I try to bring into my training with people.
Sir, I've had a couple questions come through Facebook. I promise I will ask Master Merrill. Some of them segue a little bit better with questions that I'm going to ask a little bit later, so I'm holding off on some of them. One I am going to ask that just popped in that kind of goes a little bit with what you were just talking about, maybe not directly, but Yoshiote asks, have you had any training outside of Tang Soo-do? I'm assuming that probably means martial arts training. You've had a lot of training outside of Tang Soo-do.
Yes, I trained with Master White and Master Beam and Grandmaster Shin in Hapkido. I won't go into great details about the outcome of that. At the time that was taking place, I actually, when we were at Master Beam's ceremony, his memorial ceremony down at his studio, had been the first time I had been in there in quite a few years. And the last time I had been in there, I was taken down there by Master White, and I had to perform, I won't want to say test because I have no certificates and I don't want to imply otherwise, but I had to perform and demonstrate to the 3 of them what I was able to or not able to do along the lines of type of Hapkido. I have trained with John Coro and Matt Shomo, who are Aikido instructors. We've kind of co-trained with each other for many, many years. John has since become a student of Appalachia, and actually he's a 5th degree master in Aikido, and he wanted to train and start over as a white belt. So he came up through the ranks. I think he's a brown belt now with us, but I've trained in Aikido with them. A lot of the law enforcement training was put on by the Gracies. A lot of the ground fighting stuff that we did, been to many courses that have involved them. Gentleman that went by the name of Coach Bob Lindsay. And right now I'm drawing a blank, the gentleman that founded the Spear organization. I've trained with him over the years, different courses and stuff like that. So that's kind of my outside training, outside of the martial arts world.
Sir.
Or in the martial arts, but not inside Tang Soo-do.
I think a lot of that actually answers the question Tom Lyons put out there, but I'm going to ask if there's any additional people besides several people you just mentioned as influences for Tom. But he says that, Kwanjaname Shin, Master White, and Master K were your kind of instructors and mentors over the years. Is there anybody else that you consider influencing your training beyond obviously what you just had mentioned, sir?
Oh yeah, I mean that list is long. I mean, you're sitting there, and I'll start off with that because you're in the room with me. Well, not in, I guess you're kind of in the room with me. Sorry about that. I make no bones about it. I tested 3 times to get my master's belt. The first time was the first test for 4th Dan. You were there and gave me silent encouragement and kind of kept me under wraps. My second time, same thing. You were there. You actually held for one of my breaks. I think that was my second time, when I finally destroyed the clock. And you were there when I tested for master. And I've made this comment to many people over the years. I don't believe I would have ever put 4th Dan on or master rank on had you not been in those rooms during those tests. So you are definitely one of the ones on my list. Master home check. I mean, I can't make any comments about my martial arts training without him. Certainly Grandmaster Strong has been a very strong influence in my martial arts, and probably more so in the later years, keeping me active and keeping me involved. Sometimes I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but he's able to convince me to stay involved in it. I mentioned Bill Boswell. Bill Boswell doesn't train anymore. Bill Filer, Denny Ordrosky, who's an old school guy that was back in the early days of Appalachia. He's actually come back and he comes in and trains with us on weekends. The one unique thing about Appalachia is, and always has been and always will be, it's open to any member of the World Tung Soo Do Association, past, present, and future, that wants to train there is welcome to come there on Saturdays. But, and I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out. I know I'm leaving people out. I'm one of those people, I'm like a sponge. I try to learn off of everybody. And I tell people this all the time in my law enforcement training. If I take a 2-week gun training or firearms training course and I hated it, there's still something about that 2-week course that I'm going to take out of there that's going to make me a better shooter, a more accurate shooter, a safer shooter, or whatever. And I encourage people to, with the World Tung Soo Do Association, we've got such a vast array of talent out there. Soak it all in, take it in, get to as many people as you can. And sometimes you find it in the strangest places. The people you would think you're least likely to learn from are some of the ones that you'll take a lesson out of it and it'll stick forever. Larry Crest is another one. Larry Crest is the senior Samdan in the World Tung Soo Do Association, actively training. Larry, I did my Samdan essay based on a lesson that Larry gave that I thought he was nuts. He was talking to a GUP student one time about sparring and perfect speed and being there, and I had no clue what he was talking about. And he said, it's like, be Jonathan. And I'm like, who the heck is Jonathan? He says, you got to be like Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Well, I had never read the book. I had no clue what it was even about. And I looked at him and I walked away shaking my head saying, oh my God, Larry's, he's snapped. He's finally going off. Well, it caused me to actually read the book several times. And I ended up, my title of my Samdan essay was The Lesson from Larry and the Seagull. And it's talking about perfect speed as being there. If you've never read the book, read it and look at it from a martial arts perspective. It's pretty awesome.
Thank you, sir. That's great. Appreciate it. Going to move on again a little bit to some of your roles. One of your biggest roles within the association has always been as chief of World Tung Soo Do Association security. So is there anything you'd like to share about that role, either in terms of how you started or how it developed over the years, or kind of why it's still an important thing today?
Well, it started early on with Master White and Master K and him. I won't even say conning us into going down to Philadelphia to headquarters and meet Grandmaster Shin and Mrs. Shin and the family. In the early days, before I even started training in Tung Soo Do, officially I became involved in security. One day we were down at the old headquarters building, and one of the other senior Korean masters that's is no longer with our association was there, and him and Grandmaster Shin were in the office, and Master White come back out and he threw me a set of keys to his old Jaguar. And I said, "What's this for?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "I need you to drive Grandmaster Shin and Master so-and-so around, and they're looking for locations for a building. They wanted to open a studio." And I said, "I don't know my way around Philadelphia." He said, "Well, just do whatever they tell you to do and just keep your mouth shut. Don't ask questions and just drive." And I ended up driving them around for about 2 or 3 hours, taking them to different locations and showing them different places. And that was kind of the first deal to it. And then many years later, as a Chodambo at one of the Region 8 black belt camps, Master Beam, who was my predecessor in charge of security, he called a bunch of us. Master White called a bunch of people, and we all got together in the room, and they decided they were going to elevate security to a more professional level. And of course, Master Beam knew who I was, and there were a couple other of us law enforcement people that were there. And Master Beam started taking inventory, and he wanted to take inventory of weapons. And that kind of got a little carried away. And, one thing led to another, and it's, well, my gun's bigger than your gun, and my gun's more powerful than your gun. And from there, it just kind of morphed into, once Master Beam started to become ill, unfortunately, and I think that was 1998 or 97, 98 or something like that. I was asked if I would take over as the head of security for that position, and I agreed that I would do it. And mostly at that time in the early years, it just revolved around Region 8 events, black belt camps, the youth camps, and championships, in which we had several different places, and black belt testings. And one of the unique things that I got into was I would always be the last person to leave Grandmaster Shin's room, or not always, but in a lot of times I would be the last person to leave Grandmaster Shin's room, and would wait until he would go to bed before I would leave. And I remember for the longest time, and it probably a year or more after the weekend was over, we'd be coming home, we'd be at class, and Master White or Master K would say, "So what did you and Grandmaster Shin talk about?" And I'd say, "We didn't talk about anything." And he said, "Why not?" And he said, "Well, he didn't talk." He said, "Well, you didn't ask him anything?" And I'm like, "No, you told me to just sit there and keep my mouth shut." And I remember Master White one day kind of yelling at me. He says, "Do you understand the position you're in? You're sitting alone with the Grand Master of the World Tang Soo Do Association, one of the leading masters of martial arts around the world, and you're not asking him questions?" I'm like, "Well, no, sir. You told me to sit there and keep my mouth shut and do what I was told." And he said, "Well, you'll know if he doesn't want you to ask him questions." And I did find out real quickly that, yes, he was right. If I asked a question and Grandmaster Shin didn't want to talk or didn't want to answer it, he'd let me know. But once I started asking questions, it just opened up this door. I mean, I remember up at Region 8 and in the dorms or the hotel rooms, moving the couches and the kitchen tables back and being on the floor and training with him one-on-one. And, he was very physical, very hard, and, very different. Very different. And I've said this to a lot of people, and I know there's only a few people around that probably have had the luxury of getting to see this repetitively. And, one of the few that I know is still alive is Master Vaughn. And I know he's been in that situation where you got to see the side of Grandmaster Shin when he trained versus when he was teaching. And a short story about that involves Master Susan Strom, again, who's challenging me many years ago about why I teach fighter stance in such a close stance. And, I said, "Well, it's because, training with Grandmaster Shin, this and that." She said, and she walked in with one of his books, and I forget which one of it was, but he's standing there in a center section chop, and he's got this real wide fighter stance, and said, "See, he does fighter stance like that." And I said, "He doesn't when he trains. He doesn't when he's doing his own stuff." And, so she kept arguing with me. And then one day we were down at Region 8 at one of the adult black belt camps. And of course, Grandmaster Shin would get up at all hours of the morning and try to disappear. And he was usually, at least initially, he was usually 80% successful on dumping me or security. And then as time progressed, we got those odds down a little bit more in our favor. But there was one particular time where I said to Susan, I said, "Do me a favor and keep an eye on Grandmaster Shin till I get back." And when I come back, she had this big eye, and it's like, what's the matter? She said, "You're right." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She says, "He doesn't do his fighter stance like that." And I remember asking Grandmaster Shin one time, "Why do you do it?" And he said, "Oh, Scott, you Americans, you need to do stuff different to learn." And but it's one of the things that I will always honor and take pride in, the fact that I got to spend countless hours one-on-one with Grandmaster Shin. Once I opened up and started talking to him, I found out how soft and how personable, and how he wanted to give you the information. It wasn't like what you saw in the movies where it was secretive, and he, the Korean master or the Japanese master didn't want to tell you anything or teach you anything. He couldn't wait to teach you on to the next lesson. And, to end, and because I probably guess what was my favorite lesson from Grandmaster Shin, probably my favorite one was for many years after he became really actively involved in the Qigong. He had me working on Seizon long before I was ever needing it for a testing form. And he had me develop, he would show me how he wanted me to do Seizon with every move with Ki, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. Well, I'm a big guy, and even the medical professionals said my lung capacity is about 2.5 times the average person. So when you're doing warm-ups and everybody says breathe in, breathe out, well, I'm panting because I'm like a dog, because I don't have half the air out of me. And once I'll never forget it. I worked on this for years trying to get it down the way he wanted me to do it. When I finally got it down to where he said, "That's what I want you to do," when I finally tried to do the entire form, it took me about 30 to 40 minutes to get through the entire form, doing every move the way he wanted me to do it with Ki. And when I was done, I was completely exhausted. But through that, I mean, it was kind of, I got a reputation of being, I don't know, some people would call arrogant, some people didn't like the attitude, but I was assigned to make sure Grandmaster was taken care of. My wife used to joke with me about, okay, wait a minute, you're a blue belt and you're in charge of protecting one of the ranking karate masters in the world. What's wrong with this picture? And I remember saying it had less to do with protecting him it did to prevent anything from ever causing him to have to act. And we did in the early years have some situations that became, some of the old Korean masters kind of wanted to, I don't know, prove themselves. And there was situations where one time we were kind of blocked on a bridge, and I won't go into great details. Grandmaster Strong's book talks a little bit about that. But the problem was I took the job seriously, and I made sure, as you well know, and anybody else that's worked security, it's not what most people thought it was. In the early days, the masters, a lot of the senior masters, when I was Chodambo, my son, who was only 16 at that time, he was helping run Grandmaster security. And, masters don't like to be told they're not allowed to do stuff, and especially by somebody who was much junior to them. And, so it was criticized. I was criticized a lot for a long time about how we handled security. And I'll never forget, probably the first time that that attitude kind of changed a little bit by a lot of people was we were out in Anaheim, California, and nobody was listening. Absolutely nobody was listening. I got called to the front doors. The convention center staff was called, and basically the fire department was there because we couldn't keep the aisles open, and there were too many people in certain areas and stuff like that. And they gave us like 3 minutes to get it cleared out, or they were going to shut us down. Well, Grandmaster Shin there was no way we were going to shut down this world championship just because people wouldn't listen. So we doubled the security people, had everybody going aisle to aisle, telling people to get back, and people weren't listening. So finally I asked Grandmaster Shin, I said, "Sir, I need help. Would you please allow me to ask every master that's not in a ring and not assigned to something to come up to the head table and help me with security to get these people under control?" Not that they were ruly, it was a small center and there were a lot of people. And Scott, you do what you need, but we're not shutting down. So I got on the microphone and I paged all the masters that weren't involved, or I had Maggie or Samantha Gonski page all the masters that weren't tied up. Meet me at the side table. I go down, there was only like 2 people showed up. Well, then Grandmaster Shin got on the mic and said, "Masters, meet Master Merrill." And so we kind of got a lot more people that time because they listened to him a lot better than they did me. And we put him to work trying to clear the aisles. And that was really the first time starting that from that point on, I actually got permission to use Masters on the security detail. And as you well know, there's a lot of people that started on the security detail that would do it for 1 year and decide, you know what, this is way too much work. I don't want to do it security anymore. And those of us that are on security and the dedicated crew that I have that work the world championships and the regional events, they're very good at what they do and they're very proud of what they do. And, you know, our goal is, I tell everybody at every year at World Championship, our goal is I want everybody to think security was a waste of time, because if they think we're a waste of time, then that means we did our job and everything went smoothly. So maybe I got into more than you wanted to there.
No, that was excellent, sir. I appreciate it. Those are some awesome stories about security, about world championships and what's involved, and Grandmaster Shin. I'm just going to throw a shout out to Master Heiss. I think that pretty much answers the question that I said we were going to get to later, where she had asked about your training experiences with Grandmaster Shin. So I think we definitely covered that, and those are some great stories, sir. I appreciate it. I want to move beyond then to another role you filled. You're one of the few people to have ever been Region 22 Regional Director. So maybe you could share some of the challenges, or even maybe some of the good things about Regional Director and what that's like.
Well, it was kind of interesting. I was approached by Master Homecheck and Grandmaster Strong. I don't even remember, the plaque's up there, so I could probably tell you what year it is. But several years ago, Master Homecheck had been regional director since the formation of Region 22 and did a great job at it. Probably did the job that nobody else could have done when it was first formed, because for those of us who have been around a long time, it really, most of us went kicking and screaming when it came time to divide off of Region 8. And he was very diplomatic and was able to get people to do things when they didn't necessarily want to do them, but make them, I say it's like, going down a bad road and looking forward to the trip. But Master Homecheck had a lot of other ideas and activities that he wanted to work on, and he wanted to take some time off from regional director so he could dedicate to his studios and his writings and his studies and stuff like that. So I got talked into doing it, and initially I kind of met with some resistance, and after a while, back and forth, there was some confusion. I finally got put in charge of the region, and I'm thinking, how hard can this be? I've run drug task forces, I've run SWAT teams, I've had 300 agents on raids in the middle of Center City, Philadelphia. How hard can this be? And how much time can it take? And what I learned real fast is Region 22 has a great core group of dedicated martial artists. But what you realize real quick as regional director, there may be 19 instructors and studio owners out there that think you are their personal regional director. And you're trying to kind of do everything for everybody, and you find out real quick that that doesn't work. And I remember a conversation, I think was Master Homecheck was there, and I was told finally, Scott, you need to stop trying to be Master Homecheck and be who you are. That's who we want. And there were a lot of people in Region 22 that didn't like the outcome of that, but we ended up really continuing Master Homecheck's work and making things move ahead. We progressed on a lot of things that, multi-year contracts for our tournaments, getting the right people to do the right jobs. And by the time I finished my first tour of regional director, I'd worked with Master Tom Marker, and he was kind of like you were for a while, kind of my assistant and helping out. And I decided that enough was enough. At that point, I'd taken over as chief security again, and that got to be way more than what I wanted. I was running Appalachia, running security. We had a world championship, the first one that I was back in charge of, and then running Region 22. So basically, we turned the region over to Tom Marker, and Tom was doing a great job, but life got in the way. I mean, he had a family, he had a child, he needed to move. And, after, 9 months to a year, he just realized and made the proper decision that he wasn't ready to be able to put that much commitment into it. And I was asked if I would temporarily take it back over again. And I said I would, as long as the word temporarily stayed assigned to that. And then subsequently I turned it back over to Master Home Check. But it's interesting. We have a, as I said, Region 22 is small. I can drive 6 hours and still be in Region 22 if we're going to, Central Ohio for a GUP clinic or something like that. And it really, if you haven't ever been regional director, you really ought to try it once. And it's not for everybody. And it really wasn't my best cup of tea. I'm much better at security because that's, what I've done for so long. But, I feel like I did a fairly good job of maintaining what Master Home Check had put together and really continued to make it a smooth running region with, some speed bumps in the way that we dealt with as we moved on.
Yes, sir. I appreciate everything you did as regional director. All I'm going to say is, why, and we'll leave it at that. So probably many reasons why, but I think Master Merrill did a great job as regional director. And yes, we're glad to have Master Home Check back, but we appreciate everything you did, sir.
I don't know if you have any questions. I wanted to tell one funny story that involved Master White, Master K, and I, and this was going back many years ago. I don't know, it was a Wednesday afternoon, I was in court in central Pennsylvania, and Master White's office was just down the street from the courthouse where he was running his counseling service. And Master K, of course, was at his private counseling service. And as I was leaving, I saw Master White on the curb, and I said, "Hey, what are you doing?" He says, I said, "I'm bored." He said, "What are you doing tonight?" I said, "Nah, I got nothing planned." He said, "Well, why don't we go out to dinner?" And I said, "Okay, where do you want to go?" Well, my favorite place to eat at that time was Outback Steakhouse, or not Outback, it was Down Under, out near Toff Trees at a local restaurant. And he said, "All right," he said, "I'll give Mike K a call, and we'll just meet, the three of us, we'll meet over there and we'll go to dinner." So we get there, and I'm the first one to get there. And usually we would sit at the bar because it was higher tables and we could carry on conversations. And I get there and I sat down, and the bartender comes up to me and says, "Are you waiting for your date?" And I'm like, "No," and didn't think anything of it, and got a drink. And a few minutes later, Master White comes in, and he sits down beside me on one side, and the bartender comes up and serves him. And a few minutes later, Master K comes in, and before he walks through the door, we could see him on the phone standing outside the door getting ready to come in. When he came in, he's shaking his head, and he looks at Master White and me, and he says, "Boy, did you guys get me in trouble?" And we're like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "You know what today is?" And we're like, "No." He said, "It's Valentine's Day." And here we are, the three of us, going out to dinner together on Valentine's Day. And apparently, rumor has it, I don't know if it's true or not, rumor has it that was his wife on the phone saying, "Why are you going to dinner with these guys?"
Yes, sir. That's a great story. Just something going back to a security question coming through from Yoshioda. Says next year, Region 5, Chicago will be holding the U.S. National Championships. So do you have any advice? And I'm sure this could be a long thing. And Yoshi, you may want to contact Master Merrill directly. But do you have any advice on how to run security in a large event or venue?
Well, actually, I do. I have my master's essay was on security protocols and security guidelines, and it outlines pretty much the ABCs of what we do at regional events, world events, large events like that, visiting protocols for the grandmasters and other senior members. But I've already been pretty much told that I will be there for that event since we had to cancel the World Championship this year. So if you're going to be on security out there, I'll be working hand and fist with you. But probably the easiest thing is that I have contact with almost all the regions. Each region's supposed to have a chairman of security or a security director for their region. And if he happens to, or that person happens to be that person, have their regional director email me that information, and I'll send them the booklet of stuff that they can look at in advance.
Sir. So I only have two more questions kind of directly related to you, sir. One of them is, anybody who knows Master Merrill knows that he's, a quote unquote big guy. People look at me and some other masters and say they're big guys, but Master Merrill has always been known as the quintessential big guy. So has any way that affected your martial arts career or the way you have to interact with people, something you could share?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a good side. It's the yin and yang of everything. There's a good side to me being this big and a bad side to me being this big. And in law enforcement, I found out more often than not being this big was a detriment. All of my partners, when I was on patrol, and including the night that I talked about in the early 80s where we got into the fight, we got into a fight. The first punch that was thrown at me. And it seemed like whenever I had partners, they were always much smaller than I was, and they had always seemed to have the knack of upsetting the bad guy to the point where he would always punch me or attempt to punch me. So it seemed like, I guess, the old adage, if you knock the big guy down first, the little guy won't mess with you. Not always has that worked out to their benefit. I always have been because of my size, I've been physically strong. I mean, I can't bench press my own weight. There's people out there that can bench press 3 times what I weigh. I'm lucky right now I just went through shoulder surgery. I'm lucky to be able to pick up my water to take a drink, but I've never been a bench presser or weightlifter or anything like that. But if you need a refrigerator carried up steps, I can usually pick it up and throw it on my back and carry it up the steps. But so I've always been able to rely on my sheer power to pretty much defend me. And for years, Grandmaster Shin, Master White, and Master K kept telling me, you got to stop relying on your power. You got to start building speed and technique and use your hips and, all the stuff that we teach all of our students. And it never seemed to click with me because, somebody your size even, or Master Homecheck and I used to always fight a lot. And, I think at that time he maybe weighed 110 pounds soaking wet, and he came running into me. And although I'd get a thrashing for it, I could usually just put my hand out in front of me and keep him from getting too close to me. But one of the biggest lessons that I learned, and what finally kind of pushed me over the edge, was we were at a class, and I think it was up in Phillipsburg, and Master White took a belt and actually tied my elbows around my waist. So I looked like a T-Rex. I had to be like this to do everything, and made me spar everybody in class. And it made me realize real quick, although I can knock you across the room if I can extend my arm all the way out, I couldn't do that by being tied to my side. So it kind of made me learn to be able to start utilizing my hips more. And that was kind of one of the big lessons that I ended up actually kind of breaking a threshold with my Hapkido training to make it work. And so, yeah, the big guy thing is, everybody says I'm intimidating, and I try to joke with people. I mean, most people know me, Masters and Mrs. Master Sharp. And if they're watching this, I'll probably get killed, but I like to pick on them a lot. And like at last Worlds, I kept putting handwritten parking tickets on their cars. And, every time the car would be parked somewhere, I'd put a handwritten parking ticket on it. And I thought she was going to kill me at some point. But, I've always been told that I'm very intimidating, and I try not to be. But sometimes just my size alone causes that to happen. And sometimes I want it to happen. Sometimes I don't want it to happen. But it's been, one of the constant struggles in law enforcement, especially because it didn't matter who on a search warrant made the person mad or did something wrong. I was always the one that was singled out as being responsible for it because I was the one they remembered.
Yes, sir. Appreciate all that. I mean, it's definitely, I like I said, I don't quite relate. I remember a time once where we were standing across the room and somebody came over and somebody said, who's that little guy with Master Merrill? It was me, but yeah, sometimes people are just intimidated, and sometimes, like you said, we don't want them to be. So don't be afraid to approach Master Merrill unless there's a reason that you shouldn't be approaching Master Merrill.
Yeah. That's why I always said, one thing you can tell about me, if I'm mad at you, you'll know it. There'll be no question about it usually.
There's one other personal question I want to ask. I had talked to you a little bit about this, but I only mention it because I think it's kind of more prevalent than some people realize. Back before you had tested for master, I heard you and several other masters say, I'm never going to be a master. And even after testing for master, I'm never going to test for fifth dan. So can you share a little bit about what maybe either pushed you or changed your mind, maybe to help somebody else who's feeling the same way?
It's funny because I can remember some of those conversations, and, to this day, I keep thinking, even prior to testing, before I tested for fifth, I thought, that's never going to happen. I've learned not to say never, because never's a long time, and hopefully we're going to be here for a long time. But I think what did it for me on pretty much all the ranking, I mean, it goes back to where I was a Chodan Bo for, I think, 5.5 years before I ever tested for black belt. And, because I didn't really, at that time, the belt wasn't what I was doing it for. But what it became later was when I'd sit there and I'd talk to parents about their kids and say, look, Johnny needs to test. This is good for him. This is what he needs to do. He needs to move ahead. Or I'd tell another parent who had 2 kids in the class, they started at the same time, and I'd say, look, we're going to test Johnny, and he may not be quite ready yet, but we're going to test him because I think it'll help motivate his brother to move on a little bit better. And, talking to Master Strom and even the black belt students, okay, look, you've been a first degree now for 3 years. It's time to test for second degree. Well, I really don't want to. Yeah, but you got to, because you got to look at who's going to move up behind you. And that it was advice I always told people. And then after a while, it kind of started to sink in with me. It's like, well, how do you sit there and tell your students that they need to test and need to move ahead if you're not willing to do that yourself? And it seemed like at every rank that I got to, there was somebody below me that I was telling them. In the last particular case, it was probably Master Donaldson. Look, Roy, you've got to do this. You've got to do this for your students. Well, I don't want to go ahead of you. Well, that's okay. You can go ahead of me. Well, but I don't want to test until you test. And I remember Master K not wanting to test until Master White tested. And, so it's kind of that do it for your students, do what you say and do what you do, as opposed to do what I say, not what I do.
Sir, appreciate that. I didn't even realize I haven't been watching the time, because this has been great. I appreciate it. We're actually at 1 hour and 40 minutes plus. Go, I know, right? So, but you have consistently had between 20 and 30 people watching this whole time.
Oh, wow.
So I'm just going to say, if you're out there, now's the time to throw any questions out to Master Merrill. I do have a few other generic questions that I can kind of pose to him, but if you guys have any specific ones, kind of now's the time.
And you can be anonymous.
So more of a generic question, kind of that I would ask anybody. Ask Master Homecheck if any interest you have kind of outside of the martial arts that maybe somebody doesn't know about you, that you can kind of share with the group.
Well, if anybody follows me on Facebook, they can tell that one of my interests is hunting. Come about the end of September, beginning of October, I pretty much fall off the face of the earth until the middle of January because of hunting trips out west. I'm a part-time guide in Iowa for a trophy whitetail hunting outfit out there. I help do their Facebook page and web page and do that. I love golfing with my wife and my grandson. We're hoping that if my shoulder ever heals and this craziness ever ends, that we'll be able to have out with both our grandkids, our grandson and granddaughter, who we just love to death. And I'm a big fan of dogs. I have had big dogs all my life, and they're my kids now. So yeah, those are kind of my hobbies. I wish it's been tough these last couple months, because the only way we can see our grandkids is over FaceTime, and that's they're growing up faster than we'd like them to.
Yes, sir. Another question coming in: what is your favorite hyung, either open hand or weapons?
Well, it's funny, because I just actually got done reading a thing that I had written. I don't even know what it was for. It might have been for like either Master of the Month or Studio of the Month, about that same question. For 100 years, it seemed like it would have been in the Nahanchi forms. As a matter of fact, my original essay was supposed to be on the Nahanchi forms, and I had spent a lot of time doing research and, kind of analyzed why we stepped the way we stepped for each part of the form, based on the fact that they were all one time, supposedly one form, and the way I've ridden horses a lot in my younger days. Don't anymore, because they're not big enough. But anyways, I would have said Nahanchi, probably Nahanchi Chodan at one time. But because of the training with Grandmaster Shin and Seizan, I can honestly say that when I need to focus and I need to clear my head and I need to just kind of do a memory dump and computer dump, it's Seizan that I go to, and I go to it by the way Grandmaster Shin had taught me to do it with key. And although last couple of years I've been a little bit more out of shape than I'd like to be, and I can't actually get through the entire form the way he wants me to do it. So I break it down into sections and do it. So I would say Saison's probably my all-time favorite form.
Sir, thank you. So I'm just going to ask again a couple questions while we're waiting to see if anybody else does want to say anything, because there's still 25 people out there watching. So, are there any changes you've seen in either martial arts or in the association itself, either for the better or for the worse?
I'll try to.
I know it's hard to talk about sometimes, maybe some negative things, but sometimes people need to hear that too. So either way.
Well, I think, it's kind of a double-edged sword, and I use that term a lot. I think, and you've heard me talk about, I see so many advertisements of come train with us, and we're going to do self-defense, and, learn how to defend yourself and learn how to protect yourself. And then when it comes time for doing anything real, we have to be so cautious because of liability and because of, not wanting to lose students and all of the above, that we've become a lot softer, a lot less physical. You look at the master's test. I started going down, I think the Master Strom and I were down there for a couple of years videotaping. And I think actually your first year was our second year videotaping down there. And I'm not saying this is a good thing, but we had medics there, and there were several people that got hurt. I'm not saying severely injured, but black eyes, busted lips, and you knew you had fought somebody when you stepped off that floor. And we don't seem to see that nowadays. And not that I profess and I want people to get hurt, but when we talk about self-defense, I've often said, I ask a lot of people, and when I teach police officers class, I ask this. And I honestly believe, by reading body languages, that 80 to 90% of them that answer the question lie. I'll start out with, how many of you in here have ever really been hit or punched in the face for real? And those numbers go down and down and down and down every year in the real world, which is a good thing. And they go down and down and down in the real world, in the martial arts world. So I think I often say that I was lucky because I came at the end of the good old days, but I kind of got inundated through the martial arts system before the nowadays. And, I understand why we have to be careful. I understand why, the early days, anybody had gear on, it was a cup. If you had more than that on, you didn't even step into a ring. I understand why we need all that stuff, but I still think there's got to be a way to bridge that realism and the protection at the same time. Because if you've never been hit, you never know going to know how you react until you have been. So I look at that as being kind of a slowly downhill. And I know a lot of the senior masters will yell at me, and it's just my personal opinion from coming from the real world perspective of this. And I know there's a lot of people out there that I wouldn't want to step in a ring with and want to fight them anymore for real, but I think there's some of that art's got lost. One of my pet peeves is uniforms, and I'll just let it go at that, because anything beyond that will probably get me in trouble. But we are supposed to be traditional, and I'd like to see us stay traditional and continue to be traditional. And but I think the movement towards the incorporation of the key stuff has been very good. I've seen that, Master, last Saturday, I participated in Master Benelli's. I didn't participate. I sat in my chair and watched the International Karate Zoom training session. And Master and Michael Inoshida did the last 15 minutes of the Qigong. And it was just perfect for me, because it was all moving the arms and breathing. And then the first time in 2 months, I actually slept that night. And I did it because of doing his Qigong moves with my arm. I pestered him until he finally sent me the video of it, so I can actually do it now. And I've incorporated that with my physical therapy. So I think that's the good sign of it. The emphasis on kids is great. There's not enough out there to keep kids. And I think that's one of the things that's made it good, even though I'm not doing Tiny Tigers and Little Dragons, but I think it's great programs that they've got going on.
Sir. Thank you. So I haven't really had any other questions come in on Facebook. Still a lot of people out there watching, so we appreciate that. So I'm just going to ask, is there any closing stories or interactions with anybody that you would like to share, or just final words for the group before we close off? It's been a great interview. Longer than I expected, but that is not a bad thing. It was great information. And like I said, you have consistently had people watching today. So thanks to everybody who's supporting this endeavor.
Well, I think in closing, what I'd like to say is don't take this association for granted. Don't take the people that you've met for granted. Don't take your instructors for granted. If I learned anything in the last week with the loss of Master K is I actually had tried to call him the day before he passed. And I won't go into why, but I was going to yell at him and in a way that I can yell at Master K. But you know what? We walk away from Tung Sudo, and we've got a lot of people, for whatever reasons, we part ways, and whether our philosophies have changed or whatever the case may be. And you never know when that day is going to come that person is not going to be there anymore. And none of us are getting any younger. You look at the front line, and over the last couple years, you started to see the lines a little bit younger again, people like you, sir, and Master Homecheck. But boy, when you look at that front line, the curve, or I guess it goes the other way. So I guess that's my advice is, don't take it for granted. Don't be afraid to reach out to people, ask them for help, ask them for what they know. I love seeing these things. I watched Master Vaughn's yesterday or day before, and Master Homechecks, and Master Homechecks drove me nuts. I was trying to interrupt you guys to get it to stop before it happened. And, then every time I tuned in to what you were talking about, it was like, I don't know what the word is. I'd turn into you guys to see if you were still talking, and I'd hear Master Shin, Master White, Master K, and then I'd have to turn it off, and then I'd do it again. So don't take your people for granted. Reach out to these people. There's a world of knowledge. People are dying to give you that information, dying to share that information from you. And I guess dying is probably the wrong word. Get it before that happens. The best advice I can give to you.
Yes, sir. I absolutely appreciate it. And those are great closing comments. I'm just going to throw it out because there was one question that came in from one of your former students, Donna Gillio, just is asking if there's any projects or endeavors you've ever dreamed about for this association. So you talked about what we should appreciate, but is there anything you would like to maybe leave or give with the association as a project for the future?
I think it's this is going to sound selfish. I'd like for when my time comes and I'm not here anymore, I'd like to even think for just a little bit that I may have helped to make, whether it be just a specific person or a group of people or the association, even just a little bit better. And that's hard for some people to do. And we all have given, a lot of us have given our hearts and souls to this association. And I think that we need to not look at it from the I perspective, look at it from them, from the they or them perspective. And, I think that we need to keep the younger people more involved, and not just in running classes or doing that. They need to be involved in the heart of this association. We have senior people running every aspect of this association. And I really think we need to get more younger people in those positions now before we have to make a rash decision and say, oh my gosh, look what happened to this person. Now who are we going to have do that? And I guess that's probably what I want to see happen.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it. We're going to finish up with Master Merrill then. I'll just let you know, sir, when you get a chance to check the Region 22 page, go back, check some of the comments. There are a ton of people just saying hello to you and throwing out their appreciation and their love. So thanks to everybody. Appreciate Master Merrill's time, and Tung Su.
Tung Su. Thank you very much. Enjoyed it.
I'll close us off here.